I swear I'll never forget that night. It was past midnight, and I was closing up the bar. The streets outside were empty, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own breathing. I was wiping down the tables, lost in my thoughts, when the door creaked open. He walked in. His clothes were torn, his skin covered in dirt, and his eyes looked dead. Not angry, not sad, just empty. He didn't sit. He didn't even blink. He just stood at the entrance, staring at me. "Are you still serving?" he asked. His voice was rough, like he hadn't spoken in days. Something in my gut told me to say no, but I nodded anyway. I poured him a drink, and he sat down at the farthest corner of the bar. He held the glass, but he didn't drink. He just stared at it, as if he was thinking about something too deep for me to understand. "You ever lose everything?" he asked, still staring at the drink. I hesitated before answering. "I guess, not really." He nodded slowly, like he already knew my answer. "I have." And then he started talking. And what he told me, I wish I had never heard it. He was from Nairobi, the capital city of Kenya. He had a wife, 2 kids, and a small business. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good, until everything turned upside down. First, his business partner betrayed him, stealing everything they had built together. Then his wife fell sick. They spent everything they had on hospitals, but she never got better. When she died, his in-laws took the children, blaming him for her death. They said he was cursed. With no family, no money, no home, he left the city and wandered, begging, stealing, sleeping on the streets. The world turned its back on him. People stopped seeing him as human. "Do you know what it's like?" he asked. "To have nothing left? Not just money, not just family, but to lose your place in the world?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. He took a deep breath. "When you have nothing left, you realize something." I leaned in slightly, even though my instincts were screaming at me to step back. He looked up, and for the first time he smiled. But it wasn't a normal smile. It was slow, stretched, like he was remembering something that made no sense to a sane mind. "You realize," he said, "that nothing can hurt you anymore. You stop being afraid." The air in the room felt thick, and my skin crawled. I gripped the rag in my hand so tightly that my knuckles turned white. "That's when you hear them." I swallowed. "Hear who?" "The ones who live in the dark." I opened my mouth to speak, but I couldn't. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the counter. His fingernails were cracked and dirty. "They found me when I had nothing. They whispered to me in the alleys, in the abandoned houses where I slept. At first I thought I was going crazy, but then they showed me things no human should see." I stepped back, my heart pounding. "You're messing with me," he chuckled. "That's what I thought too." Then he lifted his sleeve. His arm was covered in deep scars, symbols carved into his flesh. I felt sick just looking at them. "They asked me for something," he continued. "They said if I gave it to them, they'd give me everything back, more than I ever had." I shook my head. "Man, I think you need help." He slammed his hand on the counter, making me jump. His smile widened. "I did it. And you know what? They kept their promise." I backed away. "What do you mean?" He stood up slowly. "I have power now." The lights flickered. The air felt colder. And then, the glass he had been holding cracked on its own. I ran. I don't even remember locking up. I just ran. The next day, I told my boss about the man. I wanted to check the security footage to prove to myself it had really happened. But when we looked, there was nothing. No man, no conversation. Just me, standing behind the bar, looking at something that wasn't there. I quit that job the same day. But it didn't end there. For weeks, I felt like I was being watched. At home, at the grocery store, and even in my car. I'd catch glimpses of movement in the corners of my eyes, but whenever I turned, there was nothing. One night, I woke up to the sound of whispers. They were soft like the wind, but they were inside my room. I sat up, my heart racing. The room was pitch black, but I swear I saw a shadow in the corner. It wasn't moving, just standing there. I reached for my phone to turn on the flashlight, but my hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped it. When the light finally came on, the corner was empty, but something was carved into my nightstand, the same symbols I saw on his arm. I packed a bag and left that night. I moved across the country, changed my number, and deleted my social media. I told myself it was paranoia, that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But even that wasn't enough. They followed me. I just got a new job at a small cafe. It's nice, quiet, a fresh start. But when I walked in this morning, there was a man sitting at the farthest table staring at me. His clothes were torn, his skin was covered in dirt, and his eyes looked dead. I couldn't breathe. My legs locked up and my hands trembled. He didn't move, just sat there watching me like he had been waiting all along. I took a step back, bumping into my new boss. "Are you okay?" she asked, looking at me strangely. I pointed toward the table, but when I turned back, the chair was empty. My boss frowned. "What are you looking at?" I swallowed hard. "Nothing, just thought I saw someone." She patted my shoulder. "First day nerves, go take a break if you need to." I nodded, forcing a shaky smile, and walked into the break room. My heart was still racing. I splashed cold water on my face and took deep breaths. Then I heard it, a whisper, right next to my ear. "Still running?" I spun around, but I was alone. The mirror above the sink had fogged up slightly, and written in the condensation were those same cursed symbols. I quit that job too. I started having nightmares, visions of figures in the dark, their whispers filling my ears, telling me things I didn't want to hear. I became paranoid. I could no longer tell what was real and what was my mind unraveling. I decided to run further. I left the country, hoping distance would break whatever had latched onto me. I started over and took a job at a new bar in a place where no one knew my name. For a year, I convinced myself it was over. I was free. But slowly, things started happening again. First, small things. The feeling of being watched. Objects shifting when I wasn't looking. Then the whispers came back. They had never left. They had only been waiting. I stopped sleeping. I stopped caring. I became distant. The world around me blurred, and I started to feel hollow. And then one day, I looked in the mirror. My clothes were torn. My skin was covered in dirt. And my eyes looked dead. I realized then I was just like him. Once you hear them, they never let you go.